Hello, you guys. I am so excited to be here today with my guest, Caio Rocha. He is a consultant psychologist and he specializes in neuropsychology, anxiety, depression, ADHD, personality disorders, relationships, and so much more. Caio, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm excited for our conversation and how we can help other people out there as well with maybe same questions or interested in this field and psychology and so on.
Perfect. So, yeah, tell us more about what you do, like in your field.
So, I mean, a little bit of I did a clinical Psychologia Clínica, as I have to say in Portuguese in the UK. I did Psychologia Clínica, that it was translated as clinical psychology in Brazil, even though I don't use this title here because it's protected. We might talk about it later. So, and I worked a bit from the beginning as I was working in a clinic with psychiatrists and psychologists. I was the first person to do group work in Brazil. From the beginning, as I was working with him, he started to give me patients to work with that was not well enough to be in a group yet. So let's say more complex, more presentation. So from the beginning, I started to kind of get in touch with this part, with this, let's say, client group and working with them. And so I graduated already in university. I was very interested in this more complex and also drug addiction. That it was one of the first things I specialized on. So I was working with this client group, and then I met somebody that was a very alternative therapist with a complete different approach. Was all body work and emotional expression and so on. That was giving a workshop in Brazil, but was his community, a therapeutic community, was in the Netherlands. So I was in a difficult time in my life as well, a bit questioning everything, maybe a little bit depressed there. And I was suggested by a friend of my mom, actually, said, look, he's all out of the box, but you're going to like to meet him. So I went to do his workshop, and I really thought, this is really weird. But there was something about him and the way he was and the way he worked with people, especially his care, how much it was coming from his heart. They had a massive impact on me. And then within my way of doing things in that aspect, I thought, you know what, I want to go and learn with this guy. So I had my career already kind of in the right path. I knew the clinic that I was working with, the guy wanted to leave things to me because he found me, he said he saw a lot of potential in me. But I met this guy, and there was something missing for me, and I thought I'm going to go and study with him. So I kind of arranged everything to go there for 3 months. And this is 5th of January 2005, I came to work with him. And then for 3 months turns into 20 years that I've been here, and I studied with him for 16 years. I lived in the community to do the therapy myself in total for 3.5 years. Did many of the programs, including the way he teaches is experiential. So I did the whole addiction program as well and became an addiction specialist, group work, therapeutic communities. Then I got to expand also into, and he was a very special man. He passed away about 6-7 years ago. And he was a great inspiration for me because it was the first time I actually felt that I was with a therapist that genuinely cared about me. He was not just doing clinical work. He was really involved. He was very direct. He gave straight feedback. He confronted me a lot. And I needed that. I was stuck in certain aspects of my life that if it wasn't kind of an empathic confrontation there, I would probably not have moved. And I never seen that before, as well as therapy to the body that bypasses the mind. Well, the stuff that started to come out of there, I was like, wow, this is really, I had no idea. So it really changed my life. It was a very, very important moment in my life. And through him, I learned a lot. And then I came to the UK and I started working here. Again, in the beginning, it took me about almost 4 years to manage to get my diplomas and my studies and everything all translated and approved here. That finally I got the chartership of the British Psychological Society. At that time was British Psychological Society, the organization that will validate that you're actually genuinely a psychologist. And eventually when that happened, I was already working as a drug worker. I found different ways, care work, drug work. So I was working already in a therapeutic community because that I had enough experience. That was a government funded therapeutic community called, is still present in the UK, Phoenix Futures, that originally was Phoenix House, one of the first therapeutic communities for addicts that emerged in New York in the 1960s. So I was working there with them and doing already the work with addiction, but under the title of drug worker or key worker. And that's when the first time I was approached by a headhunting company to see if I wanted to be the therapist manager for a big private hospital in the UK, the largest private hospital. And then I went for the interview and they gave me the job. So that's how I started to work as a psychologist. And again, it stayed the same thing. My public was always, psychiatrists started to send me people that they felt that they formally called, that is not nice expression, but treatment resistant or treatment failures. And I work as well for a while in the inside of the criminal system for probation. There I started to get my fascination to personality disorders, because a lot of the people that I was working with addiction, I was working there with drug related offenses, alcohol related offenses. I started to see there was more to it, more difficulties, and that were all fitting in. I started to hear a lot about borderline personality disorder, all these terms, antisocial personality disorder, whatever, psychopath, narcissism. So I saw that it was very related to this complexity and this the addiction and so on, and criminal behavior and so on. So I started to deepen my studies and my training in it, and consequently started training methods that and approaches that were more directed to this population. And from there, it all started, and also eating disorders, like often what was very complex to treat. And it always fascinated me because I always believe that there must be somewhere a way to help at least to improve a bit the quality of life. And I didn't like it that it was still, even in the field of psychology, there was a lot of judgment, there was a lot of preconcepts about this population and so on. And I thought, you know what, I want to take the challenge. I want to see if I can learn and contribute into improving. I believe we can work with anybody and there will be a way to gain. It's just very hard to come in because there's much more defenses that were necessary for these individuals to survive. So you need to be very skilled in passing by the defenses and getting to that vulnerability, getting to that pain, and helping them to then make better choices in their lives and start to improve the quality of life. So then I work another 10 years in hospitals, in a teenage ward as well as an adult ward, managing. Then afterwards as a lead therapist. Then I was the lead psychology for the personality disorder service at the Priory Hospital. And then from there, I decided eventually to start to do more my work for many different reasons. And nowadays I have my own clinic and I get the referrals from all these psychiatrists that work with me. And it's often this population, even though I also start to work with kind of more chronic anxiety, people that also did a lot of cognitive therapy medication with anxiety did not improve, or depression. So then nowadays I think people really know the work I do and that has is efficiency, is effective. So I get people sending me either teenagers or adults, often with high suicidality, self-harm, drug addiction, very dysfunctional behaviors that are really interfering in their quality of life. So, very complex trauma and things like this.
I actually have some questions about that with just, you spoke a lot about how you help people and how the medical community has almost stigmatized, or maybe in the past had stigmatized people maybe as like unhelpable or curable. So do you think that even people who have the most extreme cases, do you find that people are able to improve or people are able to change with certain methods? Because I guess in my assumption of people with clinical disorders that people don't know how to help them, so they maybe just don't get the treatment that they need. And even, you mentioned the criminal justice system, which I come from the US, and I think often trauma is the root of most people's reason that they end up in jail in the first place, because majority of people are not born bad, right? The circumstances of life can really beat you down and make you make you crazy. So, do you find that, I mean, it's an admirable profession for you to, for people to do this, because I don't think I could handle it myself in the practice. So, do you find that most people are able to be helped? How do you help them? Like, what are the most common things you can see? Because nowadays in society, most people are struggling with, most quote unquote normal or neurotypical, or however you want to phrase it, people are dealing with some form of depression or anxiety in their everyday lives, and maybe don't even realize it, or do and just don't know how to fix it. So that's a lot in one question that I just
No,
asked.
no, just perfect. I do believe that we can help anybody that wishes to be helped. And
Hmm.
somehow I believe that somewhere, maybe so far that you will not be able to connect to that, but I do believe that the life force that we have is always there. So in a way, everybody wants to stop doing what is harmful. So I not, again, not necessarily I can get there with certain individuals. Sometimes I need, one of the things we use in the approach that I work with, that is schematherapy. I can talk a bit about it later. We have also therapy breaks. Sometimes we get to a point that we say, look, maybe this is right now the right time for you. So go take a break, have a think about it, see what, and then come back if you're willing to work on that. So I need to get, to use many different things to kind of get to the point where the person starts to get more connected to this healthy part of us that will bring healing, we call the healthy adults. But I would say, Rachel, from what you said, I think everybody is born good.
Hmm.
And then something happens. Of course, we have predispositions, temperament, right? Personality, that's something that is confused as well. Personality, we're not born with. Personality is formed. We're born with a temperament. If that temperament has the right environment, it will go one way. If that
Hmm.
temperament is not in an environment that is a good match for it, meaning their core emotional needs are not going to be met, coping strategies will be developed to be able to get, because it's their core emotional needs. So meaning their core is not optional. People think that they can live without, let's say, we could put under the umbrella, we can also define this a bit later. We cannot live without love and connection. It's not optional. Even if your mind is saying, I don't need anybody, it's not true. Your brain is an interpersonal organ, it's a relational, it's a social organ. So we need
Hmm.
that. Our food is connecting. So the issue is with many of these individuals that have been through very, very horrible traumas, to connect is very difficult, of course, because they are all defended. They need to be. What they got about the world is, this is a dangerous place. People will hurt you. People will be horrible to you. Imagine you come to their world, and then there are two people in that really, really extreme, fragile, dependent, vulnerable position. And you depend completely of that people that are around you to protect you, take care of you. If that fails and even go extremely to the other side, why would you ever want to connect again? Why would you
Yeah.
ever want to trust again? Why would you let anybody in?
Yeah.
So the art there is to get them to see eventually and help them to, okay, that was what happened there. It doesn't have to continue. There are also trustworthy people. There are also love around that. Because the issue with trauma, as is natural to the brain, your focus become completely on the negatives, because the negatives are more important to your survival. So you don't see this anymore. You don't see that there is, and you also, as you are into that, you tend to relate and attract people. We attract people that are in the same neurological wounds that we have, psychological wounds that we have. So then often the issue is that then you ended up reinforcing, because then you decided that finally you're going to make a friend, and that person, boom, does the same to you, abuse you, or break your trust, and so on. So it keeps reinforcing.
I have a question about that, specifically about attracting people, because I actually I saw an interview once with a neuropsychologist talking about I think it's your biofield, where, like,
Yes.
your thoughts, and like that you actually have, like, what people call an aura, or like an energy field around you, and you said it attracts people on the same level as you. Is that like kind of
Yeah, your let's say your map there. Your brain,
Mhm.
for safety reasons, look for familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
What is familiar to the brain. It's important to understand in a biological level, your brain is
Mm-hmm.
not busy with happiness, your brain is busy with survival. The reptile,
Mm-hmm.
the limbic system there.
Mm-hmm.
Survival is the focus. What is familiar for more than is horrible, your brain already knows you can survive. Okay, so your brain in that aspect, if you're not interfering, your brain in the automatic level will always choose, for instance, a well-known hell over a beautiful potential heaven that is
Yeah.
unknown, because
Yeah.
survival is the priority there. So, even Dan Siegel, that is a great neuroscientist, psychiatrist. I mean, he has many titles I wouldn't even be able to, but he's also a chemotherapist. I did a few courses. He says it's like there's a little map that attracts the same map. This is all
Mm-hmm.
in the unconscious, like we're not conscious about it.
Yeah.
To the point that
Mm-hmm.
you think, no, but I worked with domestic violence, victim of domestic violence in when I was working in the criminal system. And I heard many times the woman say, look, I broke up with that guy that was violent. I stayed 2 years alone. I learned to be, and then I went and I met this guy and he looked completely different and he was completely different and suddenly, bam, again.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
people, I mean, I say this to friends. I said this to my fiance. I say this to my patients. I said, the risk here is that you guys over rely on the logical part of the brain. Is that it's only 5% of what is happening in your brain when you're conscious. 95% you're not conscious. And
Mm-hmm.
if the problems will be in the conscious part, my job will
Mm-hmm.
be very easy.
Yeah.
The problem is that I need to get people to see something that they think they know, but they don't, because also the brain creates an explanation for everything. I know I did this because of that, but actually the truth is different. You did that because you got afraid, and your automatic coping strategy is that because that's what you learn as a child. So,
Yeah.
no, there is another question that I often ask my patients when they come in new. I said, "How committed you are to the truth?" It's not your explanation. You will be able to explain anything, and unless you are maybe into more a psychotic thing that some people will hear your explanation and think, "Well, that doesn't make sense." But for you, it still makes sense in your psychosis. So
Yeah.
we can explain anything we do because the mind will want to. But is that really what is going on? Often nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yes, we have a map. People from trauma background says we kind of go back to these traumatic relationships with the idea that we can repair, but as we engage in the same coping strategies as we know where actually repeats instead of repair. No, there are different ways of looking at it, but what we know is that we do attract people that are in the same level of psychological wound that we are.
Yeah. And I'm glad we're talking about this because this is one of the topics I wanted to touch on with you because I love talking about relationships and I know just learning more about I think, the world that we're living in right now is so disconnected and it's kind of we're moving like a freight train towards this very disconnected and very devaluing relationship and connection to one another. And I think it's kind of getting a little bit frightening in some ways, in my opinion. And I'm single. I know your fiance is a friend of mine and you're not, but as a single person, just the way that even before social media, before dating apps, before this, there's such a stark contrast, I think, today where the level of disconnection just keeps rising. And I think people don't realize how important it is to work on yourself and to address these traumas because we're going to become so isolated and living in our own hells, and it gets very, it could be very lonely and very destructive, self-destructive for everyone. So I wanted to see like why it's important that we address this, or to actually just inform people why it's important to address these things within ourselves. And then, like you mentioned in the beginning, that we're wired, our brains need love, they need connection, and I think people need to start waking up to that truth. So maybe kind of what do you see in relationships specifically common, and what are the day-to-day outcomes of people's lives when they are disconnected and are not like addressing
Mhm.
that they actually want love and they're afraid of it, they're continuing down the path that they are of undervaluing a connection with someone that you can trust.
Well, First of all, I think it's there are many angles that we could talk about. This is a really fascinating. I'm also very, very, very interested. I did one of the trainings I did was emotional focus therapy from Sue Johnson.
Mhm.
That is for some people is the most effective form of couples therapy that was ever created. Why? Because she kind of take it away a lot of all the other stuff, skills and so on, and she looks at what is not happening is that we don't even know, and often we of course we then do not communicate what our needs are.
Mhm.
So that is where the connection will happen. I mean, connection only happens in vulnerability. If you're not
Yeah.
vulnerable, you're not connecting. Now,
Yeah.
one of the things I could say to you, that is one of the ways I see it, the more we focus in, we have a culture of fear. One of the responses to fear is power. Power is achievement, success, how great I am, and so on, right? And this is often what we're seen as the priority in our society. And consequently, the connection becomes secondary, even though is Sue Johnson did write some researches in her book showing that actually it's the other way around. If you're in a secure relationship, you'll be much more successful. Because you have a safe base.
Mhm.
You have it's like in that aspect, it doesn't change from adult to children. They need that safe attachment. They need that secure attachment, right?
Yeah.
So I think this fascination, we hear a lot when I'm working with teenagers, how often the emphasis is that you need to be successful, you need to be, instead of helping people to find out who are you, what really touches you, what is it that really is it within you, and what are your pull or your talents, and what is your, I don't know, some people will say mission, purpose in life.
Yeah.
We not really focus in creating healthy human beings. We focus in creating successful people with
Robots.
regards to money. Having money,
Yeah.
having power, and so on. And you see there are billions of examples of people that got there and still were so unhappy that took their lives or are suffering a lot because again, you're denying an essential part of the brain. Now,
Yeah.
interestingly, if you're thinking a bit about attachment styles, when I work with couples, the most common thing that most therapists that work with couples will know, you get an anxious attachment with a avoidant attachment,
Mhm. Yep.
right? Why? Because they basically have more or less this very similar roots but opposite coping strategies.
Mhm.
So it's basically an attachment style, you could say, is a set of coping strategies. One goes overly independent, meaning, I don't need anybody because if I stay there, so for instance, you see an avoidant in a relationship, they might keep about 90% of their life as it was before the couple. Because again, if you get hurt or somebody leaves and so on, then you don't even feel that fear. Why do you don't feel the fear? You kept your life as it is. So if that 10% go away, it's very little.
Yeah, that's so good. That's such a great explanation of avoidance, and I've never heard it explained that way. That about keeping your life the same. Because someone popped into my head that I've dated, and he mentioned to me, and this is after we were seeing each other, that he was like, he works, his job is very demanding, but he's like, oh yeah, all I want to do is like hang out with the boys, and I was like, well, that's going to take a real special a woman that's going to accept that your whole life is already built up, and then they can fit into like the little tiny sliver of time and place in your life that you're willing to see them like maybe once a week for an hour. So
Yeah, I mean, it's
that's
very
so,
protective.
yeah,
It's very
wow.
protective because if
Yeah.
the more you let the person in, the bigger the impact if it doesn't work. But the
Hmm.
avoidant, as they disconnected from their vulnerability, if you say that to a person who is not working on themselves, they just look at you and say, you're just jealous. I'm the right. This is how it should be because in their mind is like, I am independent. I don't need anybody. And I prioritize myself. And especially now that you hear more stuff about psychology in the past 10 years, see, I'm doing
Yeah.
the right thing. I just put myself first. Putting yourself first doesn't mean not considering the other. Putting
Yeah.
yourself first without considering the other, it's not really putting yourself first. Fear. And then you have the anxious that they also make the other one their whole life. Of course, to the point that if the relationship doesn't work,
They
they feel
fall
like my
apart.
life is over. So there's the
Yeah.
other extremes, you see.
Yeah.
What we try to do when we work with people is to bring them to balance. The anxious needs to learn to have a life, to prioritize themselves, to put themselves into the picture, to get in touch with what they want, what they need, what they feel. Where the avoidant needs to start to consider, start to let the other one in, needs to start to integrate vulnerability. Now, of course, the anxious is more like you when you're in the extreme there, you want somebody to parent you.
Mm-hmm.
Where the avoidant, in a way, is like, I don't need anybody because needing somebody means it's risky and I'm not willing to take any risk. Right? So again, in the end, the wound, maybe the fear of abandonment and so on, is kind of there for both. But one is lost in it, the other one is in denial of it. So I need to bring them to the middle, the kind
Yeah.
of middle path there. And of course, even the concept that I think you mentioned, I don't know if I was reading some stuff as well, self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is self-preservation. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
you're just protecting yourself. It's not really about sabotaging. It sabotages maybe when you look externally, but internally, you're just trying to protect yourself. Right?
Yeah, and does that relate back to when, you're talking about how our brain wants to be, or we're on automatic pilot, always looking to be safe from our limbic system in our brains, coming from that, so we are anything that threatens what unconsciously we were taught, or how we learned to cope with our lives in the past, is just constantly looking for that safeness, even though it is sabotaging us and it's not consciously what we really want.
Yeah.
That
It's
makes sense.
automatic. The thing is to remind ourselves, when we were a child, we are vulnerable and dependent. So we
Hmm.
don't have, let's say, that prefrontal cortex executive function. We don't have the adult part of ourselves, to put it simple to people that might not be so clued up with the brain, what is absolutely fine. So we don't have that. So, of course, if we are not getting that from our caregivers, we
Hmm.
would need to develop strategies to be able to get some of that, what we call coping strategies.
Hmm.
So in that moment, they are adaptive, they are helpful. But then this other part of you develops. Maybe not so much because depending on the trauma, but it's there for you. You start to be, and one of the ways I say to my patients that says to me, I don't have a healthy adult, I say, who dressed you up this morning? Because children don't do that. So it's you. Right? So you have it. It's just not present when you are triggered emotionally. So what does that mean that also what is threatening, life threatening to a child might be threatening but not life threatening to an adult. So the response is not appropriate anymore. That's why we call
Yeah.
maladaptive coping strategies. But as you said so clearly, as we are often in automatic pilot, and the worst, we have an explanation for it. We're now
Mhm.
explaining our coping strategies and maintaining them in an automatic level because the explanation maintains an automatic. You're not questioning. That's what I mean. Are you committed to the truth? So we're using tools that we needed as a child, but now we have a whole set of tools as an adult that we're not using. And as long as you keep your coping strategies, your pattern will keep repeating.
Yeah.
The schemas, patterns are maintained by engaging the same coping strategy. And the worst is we do it and then we explain as if it was, instead of thinking, like I say a lot to my patients, it does make sense. Now, did it get you to your goal? Did you get to where you want to be? If the answer
Yeah.
is no, maybe we have to be less preoccupied with the explanation and more seeing it's not getting you to where you want to be. So it's not working. That you can explain that it makes sense, I see, but it's not taking to where you want to go. So
Hmm.
we need to think about, maybe we need to start to do, and again, it's important to know that, like let's say rejection to an adult is frightening and it's painful, but it's not life threatening. To a child, if they're abandoned as a baby and nobody takes care of them, they die. So
Yeah.
also looking at the intensity of the emotion, I know if it's coming from the child part or if it's coming from the adult part. Is one
Yeah.
way that we know if the trauma is activated. Now, how do we maintain trauma alive? We project it in our life right now. So let's say if I have an avoidant partner and the person chooses more more times to do something for themselves and not to you, and you feel, let's say, I don't feel important, and you start to bring all of that and not separate that. This is not maybe about you not being important, it's about the level of space the person can give it to you, and so on. If you just continue the same narrative, your trauma is re-experienced because you see it as if it was happening now. I remember very clear that I felt like I'm not important, not important. I could see for many other reasons that I am very important, or I was very important to that person, even though their behavior didn't. So there was a part of the feeling that is absolutely appropriate because there is the behavior. But the whole thing, it was my trauma. And if I wouldn't see it, this is actually old, it's not
Yeah.
happening here, I will act as if it was happening, and I will then make that really, and I will just keep reliving my trauma. So the
Yeah.
feeling is real, but it's from another time. The
Yeah.
message has to be challenged. Oh, nobody cares about me. No, the
Yeah.
feeling is real because I felt that. Now, is it true? But I have my friend, I have my partner, I have whoever it is that cares about me. So it's different.
Yeah.
I need to be able to balance these things out, you see.
So it's like almost like when people say you bring your old traumas from past relationships into this one, which relationships even meaning like from childhood, like maybe your parents were together and it seemed like you had the perfect family life. However, your experience of it could have been that your dad never paid attention to you. Nothing you did was ever good enough. So you learned the same thing that, the same story was applicable for you, that I'm not good enough. No one cares about me. Even the similar story as someone that was extremely traumatized and abandoned by their parents, you could have the same experience and be telling yourself the same story over and over again. Yeah. And that's what I like. I guess like it's like the stories we tell ourselves we have to change and reframe,
Narrative.
which
Yeah.
yeah, the narrative. And it's interesting because I know some people are still to this day resistant to therapy, or they think like, oh, only crazy people, because when we were growing up, like only crazy people went to therapy, right? Like who had real big problems. But
Uh,
I think that's something that my experience in therapy has done, is to help me change my perspective and understand that those narratives and stories that we tell ourselves and how we the default coping strategy doesn't really apply anymore.
mhm.
It's like changing that narrative really does help you, and when you're recognizing a pattern, or maybe you're not recognizing a pattern, it helps to give context to it. So yeah, I that's so helpful.
Absolutely. I believe like this, Michelle. I think the biggest act of love you can do to your partner and to your children is to work on yourself.
Hmm.
You might have been lucky enough to have grown up in a very healthy, emotionally environment. Unfortunately, that might not be so common anymore. There are a lot of things happen. The world changes, also social influences and so on. But when parents ask me about their children, when partners ask me, I said, look, the best thing you can do, work on yourself. That's the only
Yeah.
way you will be able to. Because, yes, unless you have awareness, you will continue to blame, and blame would never move an inch. You're going to be blaming the world, you're going to be upset,
Victim.
but
Yeah.
you're gonna and it's interesting how people don't notice the abuser is also always the victim, because they say the person. So it's together, these things, the victim and the abuser. They don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about socially, there are certain things that you cannot do it, that the person needs to be reported to the police. But I'm saying there is a level of responsibility that is equal in both sides, and
Yeah.
often we're only looking at one side because the behavior is more externalized and so on. The violence that an abuser has is within the victim too, but in a different way of manifesting.
Yeah. And I think just on a normal day with even not abuse, I know a lot of people who they're always blaming their partner, or this person just, does this, and they fly off the handle emotionally. But I think, like you said, if you start becoming responsible for the way that you can't change other people, right? You can change, only thing you could do is change your own mind and your own thoughts and your own reactions to other people. And I think if more people understood that they have more control over themselves than they are allowing by changing your reaction to other people, because someone can only hurt you if you, like, depending upon the context that you give somebody else's
Mhm.
action in life.
Yeah, and you can often what happens is that when the person starts to realize, okay, then I need to leave him, and maybe that's the right thing. But if you don't work on yourself, you're just changing a dress. The same will happen. Oh, but it's not exactly the same. Well, as an overview, that's another thing I say to patients. I'm often not so focused in isolated situations. I'm always focused on the pattern because that tells me something about you. Let's say, I don't know if we're allowed to use this word in the podcast. If not, you take it. I said, shit happens in life. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when
Yeah.
there's the same thing that keeps happening, is not shit happens in life, is you doing it. You are contributing. No, one
Yeah.
of the uncomfortable things of sitting in my room here with me is that you're going to tell me what has happened, and I will give you a certain time that you can ventilate and so on. And the question will always be the same. Okay, can we now look at your contribution to it? And of course, I have many patients in the beginning, especially say, I don't have any contribution. I say, okay, it could be, but let's have a look. Because normally we have at least a part. If it's not 50-50, it might be 80-20, but you have a part and you're changing that part, change the whole thing. It's like a
Hmm.
ping pong game. You keep
Yeah.
the person throws the ball and you throw the ball back and say, stop throwing the ball to me. And then they throw it and then you throw it back. Well, stop throwing it back. You stop the game.
Yeah.
But we're shouting at the other, stop throwing, stop throwing. You know, to understand, I remember there was a guru, I can't remember his name, so apologies for the rights there. He said something really, really interesting. He said, you understand a bit the nature of human beings in regards to looking at themselves, thinking about having a bad breath. Everybody notice is under your nose and you don't. So it's the
Yeah.
same thing with our traits. That's why the narrative can really get in the way. You want to understand yourself a bit. Focus
Hmm.
more in understanding the impact that what you did had in your environment, the result, instead of your reasons for doing. Because I believe you have good intentions. I believe you're doing it for the right reasons, but it might be coming out from your program as it's impossible not to, and you're not aware that this is an old program. It's like you have a Nokia phone and you're trying to go on Instagram. It ain't gonna
Yeah.
work. That phone is outdated. You might like that, but it's outdated, right?
Yeah.
So as we do updates on our
Software.
electronics, we need to
Yeah.
do an update in this software too, because we're living as if we are dealing with life as if we are 5, 6, 7 years old, but now we are adults and we're not using that prefrontal cortex. We're just in that automatic responses. So one
Yeah.
of the greatest challenges is to change that. Often when patients sit here and I ask them, how are you today? And they say to me, I'm okay. I said, okay, that was your automatic brain. Now let's talk about how are you doing today? And then
Yeah.
they notice that it comes automatic. And then, okay, let me go in, let me check. And then there's a whole new thing that comes up there.
Yeah, and that is something that too, like I just remembered I wanted to ask you when you were talking about before is of the importance of emotions. So two things. Most people don't realize that their prefrontal cortex is still developing till they're 25, and that's why you're not supposed to drink and you're not supposed to, excessively drink when you're young, do drugs and all this stuff because it can
It
damage
changes how
that
your
part.
brain is wired. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the part of your brain for, responsible for critical thinking, for being able to make better decisions, all amongst many other
Emotional
things. But
regulation. Yeah.
emotional regulation, exactly. So yeah, just think about if you've damaged yourself with drugs and alcohol, you're definitely not going to be able to emotionally regulate yourself compared, for a neurotypical person. But the other thing was emotions. So I think that there was the narrative was like, oh, f your feelings, fuck feelings. We don't need like to do them. You shouldn't care about how you feel. Like just work hard and push past your feelings. And I think I know that I've told you this before because I want to work on people, helping them with their emotional system and their emotional wellness. Like emotional wellness is really important because I think it's almost like like a signal, like a warning system for ourselves to show us how things are going in our life. And if you're ignoring it, your body's reaction to ignoring the feelings is going to get damaged, or a lot of people experience anxiety, depression, health issues are manifested because we ignore the emotional part of ourselves. So maybe can we touch on the importance of emotions, not only for relationships but just on individual?
Well, I will put two things that I think is absolutely great. The question, and look, first of all, emotions are your most reliable sat nav. You will never have anything more reliable. However, you need to learn to differentiate emotion from emotionality.
Okay.
Emotions for thoughts. For instance, if I ask somebody, "How are you feeling right now?"
Mm-hmm.
and the person says to me, "I feel I really am not good enough," is that an emotion or is it a thought? There is an emotional response, but that's a message. That's a thought. There is no feeling like not good enough. It's a message, cognition, I'm not good enough. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, when you hear that, you have an emotional response. You might feel sad, you might feel angry, you might
Mm-hmm.
deny that and say, actually, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, and so on, depending on your
Yeah.
coping strategies, depending on your history there. Okay. So that's one thing. Now, the other thing that we can explain to people simple, but actually by in this one, there's another thing I often say to my patients: don't shoot the messenger. The emotion is just coming to tell you what you need. And if
Mm-hmm.
you, to the point that I ask people, if a postman will come in today here right now with a letter, does it make sense me asking the postman, why are you here? I mean, it's obvious he's here because he comes to deliver the post.
Mm-hmm.
So the question for me that will make sense is like, what is the message you bring to me? But we do that with our emotions. We feel something. Why am I feeling this way? You jump straight into your head. You're not going to listen what the message is. So, and then you can't move because that is the most reliable. Now, another way of looking is like this. Because often people that are high achievers and so on, they might say that, by the way, you can achieve really high and still be healthy, but it's a different, where you come from is different. You know, you can move out of fear, you can move out of self-love. And they both can give you that, but this, when you arrive there, the experience is completely different. So think about it like this. Think about your heart is your mind is the driver, your heart is the engine. Okay? If you have a fantastic driver in a very shitty car, it's not going to be great because the more he drives great, the car doesn't follow. Okay, the car doesn't do what the man is able to do. It will be great, but it's not. Now, also, if you put a shitty driver in a Ferrari, they're going to crash that car in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, what is ideal? You have a great car with a great driver. The mind needs to work for the heart to
Yeah.
help you to make wise decisions, but is listening to the guidance and then doing. If you shut that down, you have no guidance. Actually, what is guiding you is fear, and you don't even know. Okay,
Yeah. I think
so
most people.
most people are
Yeah.
moving out of fear. So
Yeah.
what happened there is, if you have a great drive and a great car, you're gonna do wonders. Now you need to align your mind. Is a terrible master and a beautiful slave. Okay,
Okay.
so your mind needs to be working for you and not you. So yes, sometimes
Responding.
patients come to me, they are very connected to their feelings, but they're not reasoning, they're not making wise choices. So I need to straighten that. Other people come very disconnected to their feelings, and I need to make that, because you want these two things working with each other, not against each other. That's
Yeah.
partially what this stress and anxiety is working against. It's not in
Yeah.
line.
It's so funny because I experienced this myself, and something that I'm still like, obviously, it's not going to happen overnight. And it's something I've been working on myself with my therapist over the years. Just, my one therapist that I started out with she tries to tell me like, differentiating between a thought and a feeling. Like if someone asks you how you're feeling, like you mentioned before, and I said, well, I think, but she's like, I think is not a feeling, or I think it's this. And so, and that's why it's becoming so popular, like somatic therapies and somatics, is because it's helping to bridge that gap, or foster the connection between the mind and the heart, or the body. And for me, I think you mentioned it just now about how you've experienced anxiety, depression, when there is such a disconnect between the two. And I was just talking to my friend about this last night on the phone, actually, because I've been feeling, sometimes you get isolated, or sometimes you just kind of feel like, oh, I'm living here in the UK. I'm far away from my friends. I don't have like those deep connections. And the program that I've been studying in school is so mental that me myself, I forget like to bring myself back down. And when I'm starting to feel anxious and things like that, I get so much in my head that it does create those feelings of anxiety and unrest within me. So it's such an important reminder. And anybody who does struggle with anxiety and depression or just feeling low maybe should start trying to learn about this or contact a therapist about getting more in touch with their heart, because I think that's the crucial factor for most people suffering with any kind of anxiety and depression, unless you have, some kind of clinical imbalance. But yeah.
Absolutely. And again, for instance, one of the things you can say about anxiety is lack of movement. What does it mean? You have a strong set of rules internally that you might not even be aware, that doesn't allow you to feel things or validate your feelings.
Yeah.
Consequently, then what it looks like is that you're trying to control the outside. Why? Because you're trying to make sure you don't get triggered because the emotions are not okay or frightened. And the more you try that, the more anxious you become. So
Yeah.
it's like I think it's essential. Look, think we can think simply of that to give the example to people listening to us, Rachel. You go to school to learn to practice thinking. You encourage to read and so on. You go maybe to sports to exercise and work on your body. You go to the dentist to take care of your teeth. You go to whatever, all of that. Where in our society we see to learn about emotions?
Yeah.
Now, is the core essential part of the nature of human beings, and we think we should know what to do with it without practicing. I mean, for me, everybody, unless again maybe you're lucky enough to have had that because you're your parents, but still, why can't we? What is the? It's like I said. I say to my friends, if I would tell my friend, "Oh, I'm going to the gym," they go, "Oh, cool, man." If I say I'm going to the therapist, what's wrong? I'm getting emotionally fit. That's why I'm going to my therapist. I want to be emotionally fit as well as in my body and my mind. I want to be healthy in all areas. What is the? But people have seen, and it's something I work daily with, certain emotions as a sign of weakness. I always give the same
Mhm.
example. What is easier in life? To say to a person how you really feel, or to hide and pretend, or to say, it's okay, I don't want. What is easier?
Yeah.
People say, hey, it's easier to not to talk about my feelings. Okay, how can easier? How can something easy be a sign of strength? Strength is the person that face their challenges. So it's much harder to be honest and vulnerable than hiding and all toughen up. Now,
Pretending.
for me, the more sensitive you are, the stronger you are, the more brave you are, the more I admire you, because it takes courage to really say to a person, right now, I'm scared. Right now, I'm struggling to trust you. Right now, I'm really bring that, you need courage. And if you have courage, courage is a sign of strength. And courage is only possible in the presence of fear. There is no courage without fear. So if you say yourself you are a courageous person, that means you have a lot of fear that you overcome. If you're not acknowledging the fear, you're not courageous. You're an overcompensator. You're avoiding, and what it looks like strength is just your way of avoiding fear. You overcompensate. You're in a fight response, and that can be looking really, I'm strong, I'm tough. No, you're not. You're as fragile as the other one, but you're not in touch with it.
Yeah, and that's so I always like through doing some work on myself too, just the realization that so many people just run from themselves and they're hiding, but ultimately you can't outrun yourself, and you can't outrun parts of yourself, or like, it's always going to catch up, and it's just going to compound if you keep pushing it down to you explode, or it manifests into some kind of physical ailment or even like a mental breakdown. So I think, yeah, it's everything you just said is so important for people to
And
realize that.
you can't, for me, you can't say you love yourself if you have not integrated and loved the parts that you don't want to look at. Because the self is composed of multiple parts. There are parts that you like to show and you're comfortable with, and there are parts that you don't. If you can't love and see the function that they all were parts that were helpful, at least at a certain point. So be grateful to all of that and then choose which ones is appropriate to act on now or not. You can't say you love yourself. You know,
Yeah.
Going to, of course, personal care, so it all makes sense. But it's not that only. It's not you go to the gym, you tie up your hair, you go and do your nails or whatever. It's a form of personal care, but it's not what you can. Caring is being able to look at all the parts of you and see and appreciate and be grateful for them, even if you choose right now, it's not needed for me to behave that way and so on, but it's a part of me. And again, behavior is the only part that is voluntary. We can choose. The rest, it comes. We can choose what thoughts we follow, but we can't choose necessarily what we think in that moment, even though the less energy we give, they're going to start to fade away. We can't choose what we feel. We can choose what we do with it. And for that, you need to be a great driver. If you're not familiar to emotions, if your window of tolerance to feelings is this big that you dysregulate, forget, for instance, again, going back to relationship, forget about relationships. Forget about succeeding and being fulfilled in life, success and fulfillment. So I've been in therapy since I'm 17 on and off. I believe partially our conversation. I can't see how a therapist can be really great without working on themselves. I believe in my way of approaching I believe it's actually a life commitment. I can never stop looking because I made a commitment to my patients that I will give them my best. I need to keep looking because I can only see and I can only take people as far as I've been. Let's say a very exaggerated example. If I'm an alcoholic and I'm in denial, a person will sit here and say to me, yeah, I drink a bottle of wine every night. I say, oh, great. Does it help you to relax? Oh, great. I cannot, if I'm not, or I will challenge, but I will feel pretty bad and my challenge will have no power. People say, no, I have colleagues that say, no, but I know the theory. I said, okay, but do you understand that will not reach the patient really, especially if you're working with this personality disorder, like for instance, what is called borderline or emotionally unstable. They see through you. If you're not genuine, they see through you. They have been so hurt and broken in their lives that if you're not genuine, if you're not really integrated there, you ain't gonna get through them.
Yeah.
I tell my patients constantly about my journey because I want them to know I'm in a journey too. I might be ahead because I started earlier, but it's not the theory, it's the practice that takes me further because I'm facing my demons too. So when you're in yours, sometimes even I'm a bit tougher with my patients because I felt, look, you know, I understand that. Oh, you don't have empathy. I have. But right now, what you need is not just a stroke, it's also an empathic confrontation. Look, I know it hurts, but your behavior is really. So, no, I can't understand how people will want to do this work on this field and not be completely in love with working on themselves. Because I think,
Yeah.
for me, my mission, what my passion is life is to work on myself, and part of that is working with people and sharing what I learn with people. But it's like would you go if you go to a doctor and it says to you, take this pill here, and you say, if you will have a headache, would you take it? No way, I don't touch that. Would you take that pill? So
No.
you have
Or yeah.
therapists still saying to you, look, if you're anxious, go to therapy.
Yeah.
Would you go to a no way, wait, no way, I don't need that.
Yeah. Or like going to an out of shape, overweight someone, a trainer or nutritionist, you're going to be like, well, wait a minute, it doesn't look like you're living the advice that you're giving me.
Yeah, one of the reasons when I was saying to you, Rachel, that I went after this guy in Holland, his name was Danny, or people call him Videsh, is because he was one of the first people that I saw he walks the talk. Everything he preaches, rightly or wrong, he was behind it. And I thought, this guy is really real. And I needed real. My traumas were made of all of us, I think, interpersonally, people. The healing will come. The trauma was in relationship, and the healing has to be in relationship. I needed to, for me, it was essential. I need to find somebody real that is there, because that will bring me healing. If I'm just there and I feel like I'm just a number and the person is just following a protocol, and that's one reason why I think when you ask me that question, why these people often this type of presentation that I said to you, like personality disorders on. Because if you apply a manual, if you want to do technical with them, you're never going to get anywhere. You need to be willing to get involved. You need to be willing to give your heart. You need to be willing to care genuinely to that people. And that will be the healing. When they feel heard, when they really feel seen, the healing starts there. And then it comes all the guidance that you do, the behavior and so on. But if you're not there, if you're not willing to do for them what you would do to a family member, of course, the boundaries are different. You have therapeutic boundaries and so on. But if you're not willing to do that kind of limited reparenting as you would do to a child, don't work with them because you're not going to help them.
Yeah. And I had a therapist once tell me, in which like kind of put things into perspective, that most people don't understand what it means to have a real trusting, healthy relationship. And that's something that a therapist is helping you do, understand how it feels to be the recipient of a healthy relationship, and then also learning how to trust someone else not to hurt you, because
Uh-huh.
it's a reliable person that you can trust in life. It's learning how to rebuild those skills in an interpersonal relationship with someone, and that really like puts things into perspective. Actually, my friend Natasha, that's a psychologist, is the one that said that it's learning how to create a new healthy trusting relationship. Yeah.
And that's why I think in my work, as we were talking about, this journey, I'm very real with my patients. Why? I think also sometimes we have to be careful. Of course, we are therapists, but we also need to give them a true experience of relating. So there are moments that I'm upset. There are moments that I made a mistake and I hurt them. They did something that hurt me. I'm not in the aspect like there was reasons why things were different in the Freudian time and so on. Because like this secure relationship, one of the things that is harder for people in relationships is to have difficult conversations without flipping into your coping strategies, is to disagree, is to have different. We need to have that in the therapy room. If the therapist is always like, oh no, I understand, and about the how, oh, it's okay, I understand. Hey, look, that actually really hurt me. Can we talk
Hmm.
about it? You need to bring within the understanding that you are guiding, so you're going to give 150 chances that maybe if he was a if he was not your client, you already had said, look, 1 2 3 is out. There's some a mistake that I made. I kept on giving chances to people in my life that were hurting me as if I was still as a therapist, instead of switching the heads there, due to my coping strategy for compliance and so on. But within changing that, also in here, of course, you're going to have 150 chances, but still I'm going to be telling you the reality that hurts me, that I didn't like it, that, look, this is frustrating. We talk about this. I know it's your journey. I know you're going to make it. I did it too. But now we talked about this already 15 times and you're repeating the same behavior. I need to give them some reality, because like I was saying this to a patient yesterday. I said, look, if you would have done that to another person that is not me, that person will most likely have walked away, because it was about honesty, for instance, lying. I said, look, after the, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, if a person is healthy and you continue to lie with them, they're gonna move away from you.
Hmm.
No, I'm here talking to you because I'm your therapist, but hey, look, it hurts, and it's the same thing. There's a part of me that feels like I can't trust you right now. I
Yeah.
need to say that. I need to give them the understand. I understand you get afraid of saying so, the empathy, but also the challenging of, but this is not going to work out there.
Yeah.
And there is a limit here too. If you continue to do that, this is not going to work here either.
Yeah.
Because it's like you said, I need to give them the experience of a healthy, secure relationship, so they can, because the brain learns through experience, not theory.
Yeah.
So it's very important that first I give them the experience, then I can say to them, now go and repeat that. But I need to give the experience. If not, it's like if people say you need to love yourself. If you've never been loved, what does
Yeah.
that mean? You know, you need to experience, and you see how it feels now. I want you to do that to yourself as well. Right?
Yeah.
But it's to just sit here and say, oh, you know what, you need to love yourself. For somebody who was only hurt and traumatized, for them it's like, well, great concept, but what does that look like? You know.
Hmm.
So we need to give them corrective experiences. That's why I like the concept of limited reparenting.
Yeah. So much great information, Kaio. And on that note, I don't want to keep you too long because I know you've got to go about your day as well. Before we, wrap up, thank you. Where can people find you on social media? Where can, they connect with you if they want to experience some treatment with you, or, therapy with you?
Look, at the moment, the website is now in being, let's say, refurbished, so it's not online. But the
Hmm.
Instagram is online. The Instagram name, even though it will change because the sound, especially in Portuguese, is not so good. But it's Rocha, C Rocha, Sai Neuro. Okay. And the name is Caio Rocha, and then you have the sign here there. I'm so people can get in touch to the Instagram. There will be also that there's a link. Then you get directly to my PA or with me, and then we can orientate you. And also we know we plan to do more like this, and also for like online stuff that is coming up soon. No, we're now opening a YouTube channel for people that want to learn a bit more. We want to put all of these things available because my goal is to be able to reach more people than I'm able to physically in the clinic. So I want to, as many people that can feel that they can benefit from what I do and who I am as a person, because I am what I work. I have been, I come from a very difficult background and I had to work a lot on myself, and it was really hard. I had a lot of trauma. I had a lot of difficult growing up. So I can say for me, it's like this works because here I am to state that. Right. So anybody who wants to the questions or work with me or something, And also we need to make sure you get what you needed. That you was like, how do I become a therapist in this country? You know. So
Yeah.
like I said to you, I think it's mainly the memberships that the legal aspect of it that is British Psychological Society and HCPC that needs to see what the requirements they have, and then you have to provide all that paperwork. But you can work as a therapist in many different ways. There are many associations depending on what you want to be. If you want to be a psychologist, a therapist, a cognitive therapist, then maybe we can address that also professionally in another time. But also, if people
Yeah.
have questions or for us to talk about it, then you can contact me directly, and I'm happy to guide and to give what I learned.
Yeah, I can ask you, maybe if I am crossing paths with you through jujitsu or something, or if you
Sure, we
have
can.
another time, I can ask you some questions about specific programs because I kind of want to become a therapist and not necessarily a psychologist or again I don't want to work with research or any have that route. If I was thinking about just doing like the level 3, 4, 5 training to be able to get the experience in psychotherapy, to be able to work with people with psychotherapy and counseling. And then, you mentioned Sue Johnson, emotion. So, and do other trainings like that. And ultimately, I want to do somatic sexology as well, and just working with couples. So, understanding emotions and helping people get more connected, but also more women as well getting more comfortable in their bodies and working on their own healing so that they can show up better in relationships too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for instance, just a brief on that. You can, as you have already, for instance, a master as a therapist, you can have already work. There is I think, UK Counseling and Psychotherapy Association here. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, there you can already become a member and you can already say, okay, I'm a therapist. There's a different association. Then actually the title psychologist is not protected. It's only the specifics: clinical psychology, counseling psychology, educational psychology. So you could even say I'm a psychologist and therapist, and then I'm registered with UKCP or UKBA or BACP, depending if it's behavioral, depending on the approach you go. But there are things that you can associate yourself with associations that will give you the right to use the therapies, and they can back up by looking, and you can then get insurance and so on. You can do through the psychology, that is BPS, British Psychological Society, and HCPC. So depending of what, let's say, title you want and what you want to go, there are many different pathways. Because, for instance, we have BABCP, that is for behavioral and cognitive therapy. We have for counselors and psychotherapists. We have from bodywork therapists. So there are different associations that you can get under their umbrella, what will give you the right again to work, to have a number that your clients can check. Because some people are working with any of that. The only thing is that if a patient have a problem and, for instance, wants to sue them, if they're not registered with anybody, there's nothing you can sue. I had a patient that came to me once that was taking hallucinogenic with the therapist. When she went to try to sue this guy because she ended up psychotic in a ward, the guy was not associated with anybody. So basically, even the police said, "Look, there's nothing we can do because it's your choice to be with a person who doesn't have an affiliation to anybody. So he doesn't have an ethical conduct to follow and so on. There's no leverage. There's nothing we can do. You
Mm.
chose to, So again, you have different pathways for therapists, cognitive therapists, body workers, psychologists, they are different, and any of that will work and just give you credibility to the point also that you can get insurance, but also that your patients or clients will know that you are a professional that work under ethical conduct, that you have the confidentiality, that you have to respect that, because if not, you have a disciplinary and then you could be sued in court and so on. That in a way is just for safety, that the patients need to know you are qualified and you're doing that responsibly.
Yeah, exactly. And the experience just being guided on how to work with people ethically is kind of where I was, what I was looking to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we're obliged to present that we do supervision, that we continue professional development. All those affiliations to all this, they will then keep the standards there, that you show that you keep learning, that you have a conduct, that that you will be maintaining your professional qualities and so on, and is up to standard, that is safe to work with you. I think that's reasonable to think when you look for therapists. Look
Yeah.
for these things,
Yeah.
because they keep you protected.
Yeah, definitely. So helpful. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I really
Thank you for
appreciate
having me.
it. I'm so happy that your lovely, wonderful fiance connected us.
She's great. Yeah, we're working, we're growing, and I think the relationship, the number one non-negotiable thing I always had it in, is somebody who is willing to look at themselves and grow with me, and she is. So
Yeah.
I'm very blessed that we're in this beautiful journey together. It's not easy. Many times it's very challenging. It's very confronting to see that reality, but we both, committed and determined to do that. And I feel very lucky and very privileged that I have such a brave woman by my side, and that she does this journey with me. And I feel like we only grow and become better human beings and better partners. So
Well, you guys are inspiring to me, and if yeah, that's what I want. Can you maybe you can have someone that you know that's working on themselves, that wants to be in a relationship, to work on a healthy relationship. You send them my way.
for sure, I have some exceptionally. It's a bit more exceptional men that are really willing to go there. So yes, if there is anybody that comes to mind, I would definitely say, look, it's a person that you might want to meet, and maybe that works. We
Thank
can
you.
create a service of matchmaking where we first assess their level of
Let's
emotional availability and commitment to work, and then if they then we match people in that level.
let's start a new dating trend or a new dating structure for people. Screw the apps. We've got a new one that actually is going to work for you.
We have one that is therapeutically managed. That is better.
Yes. Yes. Approved. Yeah,
That's a
definitely.
good plan.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and you have a great
Thank you
day.
for having me. You too. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.